We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, a very special podcast and interview show that we've been running here on Pro Cannabis Media for a few years. And today we are joined by a gentleman out of New Jersey named David Cunic. He runs UCS Advisors, which stands for Using Cannabis Safely. And I can call you Dr. David, can't I, David?
Yes, you can. Yes, I have a couple of doctorate degrees. So it actually is Dr. David. And fun little fact for our non-cannabis companies, UCS stands for Use Common Sense.
Oh, I like that. It's got that double meaning thing, which is so important when you're branding too, because you can adapt your brand to the audience that you're talking to, right?
Exactly. And part of really how UCS came about was due to demand that was really needed in the cannabis and hemp sector. And one of the biggest things is being a medical professional by trade. Part of our medical code of ethics is to empower and to educate the patient. And that's about every aspect of medicine, which includes cannabis, which includes CBD, which it also includes saying about all the different type of alternatives instead of taking opiates or other drugs. And when it comes to business, a lot of times we don't use common sense. And sometimes if you just use common sense, the problem gets resolved very simplistically.
You'd think so. It should work out that way. But as we all know, life is a journey, and life throws curveballs at us all. And who expected the pandemic to hit in the middle of 2020 in a critical historic time in the development of our democracy as well? And the fact that it's actually now a political issue in a presidential race is a fascinating development for me that I've lived to see this day in my life. Do you feel that way?
I can't say I feel exactly the same exact way as you on this one. What I can say is I've been involved in cannabis for over a decade.
Okay.
I got involved back in 2009, 2010. To see how much it has changed between 2010 to 2020 is night and day.
Right.
For people to say to me, oh, wow, you've been doing this for over a decade. You're a pioneer in this industry. I'm like, no, I am not a pioneer whatsoever. Now, did I get into this sector much earlier than other people? Yes. But what I think is really interesting is not so much the political debate, but really two things. One, during COVID-19, cannabis has been deemed essential in over 30 plus states. Not gyms, not restaurants, not salons, not barbershops, but cannabis was deemed essential in over 30 plus states. And the second thing is I tell people this, from 2010 to now, there's over 32 states that have medical cannabis laws.
Right.
That's pretty impressive.
Absolutely.
And to see how many more states we have on the ballot for this November for either legalization or medical use, it's just absolutely mind-blowing.
And it's funny, when you talk about it as an essential substance, it does go to the fact that it's a medicinal plant that has been part of our world in medicine for thousands of years. One of the most interesting factoids that I discovered over the last few months as I continue to get more and more knowledge about the history and the usage of this is that doctors in the United States in the 1920s wrote 3 million prescriptions for cannabis. Now, this obviously was before 1937 and the Harry Anslinger and the banning of it all, and DuPont and Hearst and all those evil white capitalists that saw this as an evil weed, and they didn't recognize the essentialness of that medicine. And I've run this theory by many people that I've talked to, oncologists and doctors of cannabis, that if that drug hadn't been outlawed, would we have had as much rampant cancers that we've had in our society over the last 80 years? And every one of them says, not just cancer, but anxiety and epilepsy and aggression and all those things. And they all think that this is an interesting theory. Of course, I have no proof and I'm not a doctor, but I did play one on TV once, David, I swear.
I mean, well, it's interesting. Back in, I think it was 2015, when I was interviewed by USA Today, I was quoted saying how cannabis is a modern day penicillin.
Right.
And I am getting quoted in several magazines and other publications and media outlets talking about that. And I tell people all the time, like, remember, the physician who invented penicillin was shunned and outlawed in the medical community. And then I think it was either 15 or 20 years later, next thing you know, he's winning the Nobel Prize.
Right.
And look, we use penicillin all the time now. And, you know, I use that as a great example all the time because as I tell people, especially treating patients, well, they go, well, you know, Dr. David, how can I talk to my primary care physician or my orthopedic surgeon about cannabis? And I say, why can't you? And they go, what do you mean? And I say, think about this. It is a physician's code of ethics to literally look at every different treatment option. So if your doctor is anti-cannabis and anti-CBD and won't even talk to you about it, well, that's a problem with the physician, not you. Because when that new drug comes out by Big Pharma and that drug rep comes out and teaches them all about the new drug, what do? They talk to you about the new drug. Right. Same exact thing.
So you mentioned the word pioneer and how people view what you're doing at this time. And you said 10 years. One of the interesting developments that I found in our little journey here at Pro Cannabis Media is I still have to prove myself that I'm pro cannabis, even though I have been a regular user and a medicinal card holder since it became available to me in Massachusetts in 2013. The pioneers who were part of the advocacy movement that started NORML and started a lot of the action in California, people like Steve D'Angelo, for instance, who's, you know, age appropriate with me. We're both in our 60s. And he was involved with the going after the illegal drug from like the early 70s and then saw it through to fruition in the 90s in California. He's a true pioneer because he's been fighting it. But what about the respect from those people for those of us like myself who have just been using it, let's just say casually for most of my life. And now, you know, it's like I have to earn my stripes with that community. Are you finding any of that when you go out there into the cannabis space?
You know, that's a very interesting question. And I'm a little delayed in my response because the one thing I actually teach a lot of people is that it's very rude to ask someone, oh, do you smoke? Oh, do you use cannabis? Because everyone's different. Because if you're treating it as a medicine, that's like me saying to you, oh, Jimmy, how many pills do you take a day for all your conditions? Or, hey, like what kind of vitamins do you take every day? You know, it's not anyone's business.
Right.
So, so that's the first aspect. The second aspect is myself, who used to be the CEO of a publicly traded company, who's raised millions of dollars for my own companies and other companies, who sometimes has to wear the jacket and tie, like wearing a collared shirt. I'm dressed up right now. Usually I'm wearing a t-shirt and shorts. And sometimes people will say, oh, well, you're like a suit. You're like just a suit in the industry. You don't really get what's going on. And you have to say, well, no, don't judge a book by its cover. Right. What I rather say is this, is that, and for you, Jimmy, I could ask this question just to anyone in the community, is how consistent are you with helping moving this movement forward? Are you jumping on the bandwagon just for a couple weeks, a couple months? Or are you really in this to really help propel this movement forward? And that's kind of where I tell people about earning your stripes. Are you a fly-by-night company? Or it's kind of like going to a networking event and you meet someone and they never show up to another networking event ever again. It's like, okay, what are you really doing in this industry versus, hey, you're showing up to all the events, you're being proactive. I'll take another step further. In New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, we're really slow compared to a lot of other states with cannabis reform. And a lot of lawyers, social media experts, website designers, accountants, like, hey, Dr. David, how do I get involved in the industry? What do I do? What do I do? I go, well, it's this thing called Google, and start looking up some marijuana newsletters, sign up for that. And then there's a bunch of events. There's a bunch of online events. Show up to them. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you kind of have to earn your stripes. Like, you need to show up and let people know that you're in this. And by showing up to the events and showing your face and networking and talking, people will know that you're serious about this.
Absolutely. And that's what I have tried to do, certainly in my backyard in the Massachusetts area, which of course voted in adult use back in 2016. And it took them 2 years just to open up the first dispensary. And the amazing thing about that is the state of Maine voted it in at the same time. And they're just now have a date, I believe it's October 9th, where they're opening up their first adult use dispensary. So this industry does not just, move forward quickly because of the different legislatures and laws and regulations that a lot of these states are putting on the industry. And I guess the big question, Dr. David, who is also an advisor to a lot of startup companies, is what's the right model? First of all, define what a vertical is in the cannabis space.
So vertical is where you can grow the product. Then you could also bring it to your own extraction lab if you're trying to break it down into to put it into vaporizer cartridges. And then you can also sell it out of your own dispensary. So as I tell people, for vertical, it's like doing everything in-house. You're not outsourcing anything. And I'm also really happy that you brought up Maine and Massachusetts, because as someone who has worked with the medical marijuana caregivers of Maine for numerous years, I use the state of Maine as an example to people in other states where they think, oh my God, legalization's on the bill. We're going to pass it. We're going to be able to smoke weed the very next day. No, that's not the case at all. And I use Massachusetts, which took 2 years. I use the state of Maine, which is almost taking 4 years for it to occur, and saying just because you get legalization doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. Now, for startup companies, for the last part of your question, I tell people this, is that you have to really look at yourself and say, do I want to be a business owner, or do I just want to be an investor and make money off this industry? And there's nothing wrong being an investor. People don't realize you're being a business owner in a very difficult industry with a lot of rules and regulations. You're jumping through a lot of hoops, and therefore you may not really want to be a business owner. You might actually want to be an investor instead. And once again, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
No, absolutely not. And I've got a great opportunity for anybody out there who's listening to this. They'd like give me a call and be happy to chat with them. But you make a great point about when voters vote in something like this, one of the first things people do is they go outside and they light up a joint and they partake. And that's still illegal, is to smoke it in public. And, it's similar to like cracking a bottle of whiskey outside and taking a swig of it too, because you're not supposed to consume outside of a licensed establishment. So getting that mentality that this is going to be a controlled substance still, but it's being controlled by a set of regulations that the state cannabis commissions put in place. And that little item still hasn't quite grasped everybody in the public yet. But again,
and it's also about like using, like we talk about like UCS, use cannabis safely. Like we talk to our patients who have medical marijuana cards saying, hey, do you know the rules for transporting cannabis? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, every state has different rules and regulations where has to be in a certain type of container, has to be in your glove box. The glove box has to be locked. You have to make sure you have your card on you just in case. You can't medicate while you're driving, And I bring this up to people because, one, if you're going to get a medical marijuana card, learn the rules and regulations for your state. And secondly, also, a lot of police are still learning what the rules and regulations are. Right. I've heard stories from patients in Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, where they've been pulled over for cannabis smell, and they've had a talk with the officer to talk about what the rules and regulations are.
Right.
it's a very new ruling overall, and they're playing catch up. So
There and while there are still some good law enforcement officers who will make that stop a educational experience and an informational experience, we both know that cannabis is a civil rights issue as well, because law enforcement can target people of color and harass them, not inform them, not educate them, because they know that if they find something on this person, they can put them in jail. And it's happened quite a few times, as you know, in states like Alabama, where they found someone, God, I can't, it's Shane, is it Shane Worsley, I think is his name, that got arrested, medical user in Arizona, pulled over to get some gas on a trip, I believe, to Florida, had his windows open and was playing air guitar, got the attention of a law enforcement officer from Alabama. What do you think happened? He asked him if he could search his car. And the wrong answer is, well, yes, of course you can, officer. No, the answer is no, you can't search my car. You have that right. And sure enough, this guy's been in jail for 5 years, and it's one of the people who's been targeted by the Last Prisoner Project that Steve D'Angelo has started, trying to get all people who have been incarcerated by cannabis possession offenses out of jail. So as far as it being a civil rights issue, do you understand that analogy, I'm sure?
oh, of course, I do, and it's something that comes up a lot. As someone who's started 13 different companies, I'm very proud of the fact I've hired a lot of veterans, and I've also hired numerous ex-cons. And I have a close family member that actually works for the federal prison system. And I was taught early on that people need a second chance in life.
Right.
And my very first company I owned when I was 25 years old, my fourth hire was actually an ex-con who, true story, actually robbed the bank in college. He was a college football player, very well recruited, just wanted money, did something. He was a stupid 19-year-old kid, and he went and he robbed a bank with two other football players. Served his time, and yeah, it was funny. I met him actually at a gym, and for some of my medical facilities, I need some additional help. He checked all the boxes. He interviewed great, and from there, it was just kind of the rest is on. So, I mean, the one thing I also tell people too is that in this industry, if you really want to make a difference, go out, hire some ex-cons, go out, hire people who have felonies on their records, if you can, because it's about giving that second chance and giving that people that opportunity.
It's funny, you mentioned Massachusetts and Maine. A lot of states that have it on their ballot this year, like Arizona and South Dakota, and I believe New Jersey as well, also are talking about social equity applicants getting an opportunity to get into the business. However, I know you understand this. You really do need capital to start a business in the cannabis space because of the strangling those regulations that you have to have in place even before you go out and ask for a license. And while the reality is it's difficult for that to do, at least people are recognizing that we need to do something to give those who have been most impacted by this failed war on drugs an opportunity in this new business. But without capital, you can't get going. So it's kind of a catch-22, isn't it?
It is. But what's interesting is Marijuana Business Daily did an article, and they talked about, and they interviewed a bunch of numerous African Americans in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about raising capital and racism, and it was really interesting because some of them were like, yes, I experienced a lot of racism, very difficult time raising capital. And some of them saying, no, I haven't experienced it whatsoever. And what I will say is this, is that, and I tell all our clients this at UCS Advisors, is that do not act like a high school senior. And people say, Dr. David, what do you mean a high school senior? And I go, great. College is what? Let's say $50,000 a year. The average person goes to college for 5 years. That's $250,000, okay? So let's take it a step further. Okay. Does that mean that, okay, hey, I'm going to graduate high school. Hey, will you write me a check for $250,000? I have no game plan. I don't know what college I'm going to go to. I don't know what I'm going to major in. I don't know what I want to do for my career. That's a big ask. You know, would someone give an 18-year-old $250,000? The answer is no. Okay.
Right.
So when people don't have their pitch deck together, their executive summary together, when they're asking for someone for money and they do not have a clear return on investment for the investor, you know, that's another red flag. Right. So you really need to have your act together and have a clear vision. A great example is I just spoke to someone in Massachusetts who has one of those social equity licenses. They're raising capital, and they did a phenomenal business plan, phenomenal pitch deck. On their own, they already raised about $1.75 million. And it was great. And I asked him, like, hey, are you finding a tough time raising money? He goes, not really, because I hated doing the business plan. I hated putting together the pitch deck, and I hate presenting in front of investors. And I go, that's a lot of things you don't like. He goes, yeah, but because I didn't like it, I knew I needed to do it. Oh, versus other people that we see, oh, hey, I need money. Can you help me right away? Okay, well, what do you have? What are you offering? Oh, I don't know. Just get me money. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. So, so I will just say is we tell people here at UCS Advisors these green nuggets of information. And our number one green nugget is failure to plan is planning to fail. Once again, failure to plan is planning to fail. So you can raise money. You just got to do it. You got to do it the right way.
And what is that right way? I mean, doing the planning, writing the business plan, talking to people like yourselves or others who have had success in the startup and raising capital world. What is the one thing that you look for in a business plan that you have to have in there to attract the capital that you're asking for? What's the biggest factor there? Is it that ROI? Is it the team? Is it the problem, the market? What is the one thing you look for as far as the key when it comes to that?
Well, but before it's the one thing to look for, because that's very much a trick question. Let's just go over some quick numbers real quick, okay?
Okay.
When you're pitching to investors, there's less than a 5% closure rate. Think about that. So for every 100 people you pitch your idea to, expect 5% of them or less to actually sign a check. That's not very high, okay? Yeah. The second thing is, and this is the other thing we see a lot, is that however much money you're going to raise, expect to spend 5 to 10% of that in actually raising the money. So if let's say you want to raise $100,000, be expected to spend $5,000 to $10,000 out of your own pocket to raise that money. Right. And people don't realize that. People think, oh, I'm going to raise money. It's not going to cost me a penny. You know, I'll spend money on the lawyer and maybe a little money in the account, but nothing else. And people forget that. So I tell those to people, those facts, because you get a lot of people say, oh, I need money. Just get me money. And you say, great. Well, there's going to be a little bit of cost to it. They go, no, if you're good, you just get me money. And I tell people, well, that's like throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks.
And that's been the mantra in the cannabis industry in the beginning of this too, by the way. I think you and I talked about Dean Matt's book, Going to Pot, Welcome to the Shit Show, and his description of what his first year or two in that cannabis space as a acting CFO was like. And, you know, he talked about none of these people that were getting millions and millions of dollars were doing any kind of due diligence at all. And it was kind of scary to read the book. But then I said to myself, if there is that many people out there with that much money to burn, because I'm guessing at the beginning when you're an investor and you have that kind of money, you don't invest it unless you know if you lose it, it's okay, right?
For some people, yes. Some people took the risk anyway and gave money they couldn't afford to lose. And to circle back of your question about what investor or what I look for or what investors look for, one, every investor is different, okay? Some investors want that, hey, I don't care if I get my money back in 4 or 5 years. Some investors are like, no, I want a short-term return on investment where I want my money back in less than 18 months or less than 2 years.
Right.
It's also down to timing.
Right.
People think you can raise money year round, and that's just not the case. There are certain times of the year it's extremely difficult to raise money, period. But when you're presenting to an investor, there are just some basic 101s, which is, okay, how are you going to pay back the investor? That's kind of important. Are they getting a dividend? Is it like a loan? Are they getting equity? Is it, are they going to get paid back if the company gets acquired? The second thing is that what's your vision? Okay. What's your goal? What's your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan? Which a lot of people will say, well, I can't think that far ahead, Dr. David. I'm like, if you can't think for your business 5 years ahead, and it's going to take you 3 years to pay back your investor, that doesn't really sound very good now, does it?
No.
The other thing is too, which some investors look at, and be very frank, is how much are you paying yourself? Because you will be amazed how many investors will just go look at your pro forma and look exactly how much you're paying yourself and your employees, and they're like, yeah, that's too much money, I'm done.
Interesting. That's like the first thing they look at and they say, oh no, I'm not interested in that, because he values himself more than he values his company, correct?
Well, yeah, exactly. And then the last part is, this is 2020. There's plenty of research out there for other companies. You have many publicly traded companies here in the US where they show their financials. Back in like 2010 to 2013, 14, when I was raising capital for some of my cannabis companies, there wasn't that much research. There wasn't that much financial data out there. So it's difficult, but now it's 2020. And if you can't take the time to do your own recon work, I'm sorry. Because at the end of the day, when you're raising money, it's telling a subjective story backed by objective data. And there's plenty of data out there.
Yes, there is. And in fact, and being a doctor, you understand that it really has been science and research that has driven this green wave through this country, and as well as the lobbying effort in Washington, D.C. And we've gotten to this point now. But I do want to ask you a question. I'm going to throw out something that I learned from a guy by the name of Bruce Linton. A lot of people in the cannabis industry recognize that name as the ex-CEO of Canopy Growth, who was involved with the building of that company and has since left that company. And I asked him a question about media companies in the cannabis space. There's been a few of them that have been properly capitalized and then have failed a few years later. Any ideas on why a media company had this bunch of capital, put out a bunch of content, and then wasn't able to turn that into a sustainable business venture? Any idea why this has happened? Bruce told me what Bruce said, and I'll share it with you, and then you can react. He says they weren't media companies. They were trade show companies. They were conventions that turned into media companies. What's your feeling about that?
I agree with Bruce wholeheartedly on that. And so I fully agree what Bruce said about that. And the other thing is too, it goes back to what's your vision? What's your plan?
Right.
I've had numerous media companies come interview me and also look for capital.
Mm-hmm.
And when they ask me about capital, I go, great. How are you going to pay back your investor? They go, I don't know. And I go, well, that's failure to plan. It's planning to fail.
Right.
And then I go, great. Can you show me a 5-year performer? Like, how do you plan on growing? And you're taking your media company to the next level and capitalizing on it. Oh, we're going to get sponsors. Okay, great. What's the closure rate for getting a sponsor? They're like, what do you mean? And I go, well, for every 100 companies you pitch to for a sponsorship, what's the closure rate? 8%, 5%, 15%? Because then we can start looking at numbers and seeing where things are going. On top of that too, I've seen media companies have too many branches. Hey, we're going to do a podcast. We're going to do a TV show. We're doing a radio show. Then we're doing this. Like, okay, well, what's going to bring the most amount of money to you in the beginning? Sometimes you got to be a little more laser focused and be like a 3-foot putt and make it nice and simplistic. But that's one of the things we do see with media companies is what's your clear exit strategy. Then, and here's one of my other favorite ones. I recently was pitched by a potential cannabis movie. Okay. And they're raising money for a movie.
Mhm.
And they sent me a 27-page pitch deck, 27 pages.
Nope.
And me and my team went through it. Me and my team all had the same exact reaction. If you are a movie company and you're going to make a movie, well, why don't you put together like a 60 to 90-second video reel of what you can do and what your vision is? And when we went back, and we always do, because one of the things we do is we work by the hour, kind of like an accountant or a lawyer, because we want to be really cost effective from one entrepreneur to another.
Mhm.
And we always give away our first hour and a half, 2 hours for free, just to help people out. And we asked them, like, hey, do you have an example of any of your films or any of your media work? And they're like, well, yeah, but why do you want to see that? I'm like, great. Well, where's your example of your vision on this? Oh, you want to see that? I'm like, well, yeah, if you're the director and you want money from investors, yeah, I'd like to see like what you want to do. Like, why are you sending me all this on a pitch deck? You can just send me a quick 60-second video reel.
Mine's a minute 30. It'll be in the email. No, I'm only kidding. Everything has to be like that. But that's actually very interesting. And it actually makes me feel better about what I'm doing here, because we do have a vision. And we started the podcast. This all evolved from my podcast that I started in March of 2018. I had no idea what even well, I did know what a podcast was, but I wasn't sure what could happen with it. And the next thing I know, well, it's not even the next thing. It's been 2 years later. Now, all of a sudden, we're getting noticed. Now, all of a sudden, we understand that. And again, I teach media, so I understand that the product of media is not the content, but the people who are watching it and devouring the content. And that's the key. And then monetizing that is the key to perhaps actually making money, which, as you know, is the goal of every business, isn't it, David?
Yeah, it is. And also too, give yourself credit, Jimmy. Like, great, you've been doing this for 2 years, and you said now you're starting to get noticed. It's because you've been doing it for 2 years. Right. Like a great example is there was a media / event company, right, that they engaged with us. And when they first started with us, they were doing literally less than $8,000 a month in revenue. And within a year's time, we got them up to almost about $19,000 a month. And unfortunately, we got them built up in such a quick time that in less than a year, they said, okay, we're good. We have this. And we warned them saying, hey, listen, you need to really start to focus. Are you an event company or are you a media company? Right. Because your podcast and your shows are so inconsistent, you're going to lose your audience. Right. And you know what? Unfortunately, they packed up shop within 6 months after they let us go.
Interesting.
And
audience,
they just,
yep. Audience is yep, the product of media. It has been for years. It's how commercial media started in this. It's how newspapers started. They had to put ads on the newspaper. They had to put ads on the radio. They had to put ads in television. And don't get me started about public television. But bottom line is, it's about creating good content and attracting a following. And the other thing that I'm taking away from what you just said is it's the consistency of the production. It's why we are so happy that we do produce 2 new pieces of content every week, a podcast that I do, this In the Weeds, and then our weekly Weed Talk News that we do with our flagship outlet, our flagship affiliate, Cannabis.net, and their founder, Curt, Dalton. One thing I didn't do is give you an opportunity, Dr. David, to kind of tell us your story. And the other thing we haven't identified is you're actually a doctor of physical therapy, correct?
Yep, and then I have a second doctorate in healthcare management. So I actually have 2 doctorates.
So how did you become so experienced in working in the business world?
Wow. So in general, just 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them proportionately. No one in my family is an entrepreneur. No one in my family owns a business. Definitely different. Like, well, as I said, one of my close family members works for the federal government, and here I am in cannabis for over a decade. So those are sometimes some interesting conversations. But pretty much, long story short, I knew I wanted to be a physical therapist since I was 16 years old. I've had a bunch of surgeries on my own body. I have a bunch of hardware in my own body. And my goal was to always open up my own physical therapy clinics before the age of 30. expand them, sell them, and then and then retire. You know, that's the goal at 16 years old. I was very blessed to have become a therapist. I started my first clinic at 24. I did 6 expansions in 3.5 years. My clinics were voted #1 in North Jersey for 8 years in a row. I had the contract for the New York Red Bulls, which is a Major League Soccer team.
You don't have to tell me that, right? You know my background in soccer. I know you
Yeah.
do. Okay, keep going.
I worked with NFL players. I've worked with Olympians, Division I college athletes, and you know, I did a lot of really cool stuff in the industry. And I sold all those companies by the time I was 32. So everything I wanted to achieve in physical therapy, I achieved by the time I was 32. So what ended up happening was when I was about 26 years old, my first publicist said, "Hey, you have a baby face. You look really young and you're expanding all these clinics. You know, you might want to go get a second doctorate degree just because of maybe look good." So I actually went and got a second doctorate degree with her recommendation. But then from there, what happened was for business, I just happened to be good at it. I took a medical approach towards business. I had to raise money for my very first business. So I was thrown into this world of fundraising over 16 years ago. So from there, what ended up happening is that instead of paying someone else to do something, I'm like, well, if I can do the business myself, why not? Right. I mean, a great example is I had a merchant services company. I can't tell you anything about merchant services. I'm not a merchant services guy, but the company was based on the West Coast. They wanted an East Coast presence. We said, great, give us all the rights for everything east of the Mississippi River. We paid probably like $50,000, $60,000 for that. We built the company up and we sold that within 9 months for about $150,000. You know, just the opportunity was there. Sometimes it's Richard Branson. Even though he's a little brash, he'll say, you know, if you're given the opportunity of a lifetime and you don't know how to do it, say yes and then figure it out. Right. Not that everyone really agrees with that quote, but just really from there. And then people always ask, how'd you get involved in cannabis? And right time, right place. We are producing 100 articles every day on health and wellness for people and for their pets. And we were covering medical marijuana. We were covering CBD for dogs back in 2010. Wow. From there, we got involved with the testing lab sector. So we had testing labs in Denver, Las Vegas, Portland, Oregon. Then from there, got involved with vaporizer companies, dispensaries, extraction facilities, and UCS Advisors was born out of need and necessity because the unofficial stat is that about up to 65% of business owners in this industry are first-time business owners. They don't know what they're doing. They need help. They need guidance. And fun little fact for you, Jimmy, we are advisors. We're not consultants. And I love telling people the difference. As per the Webster Dictionary, a consultant is hired to work on a specific problem retroactively, okay? And that's it. They come in, you hire them to work one job, then they're done. An advisor is brought in to work on a company's short-term and long-term goals while using a multidisciplinary approach and providing real-life experience. So an advisor is someone who actually has been through what you're going through, has been in your shoes, knows you got to look past the hood of the car, but you still have to look just past the hood of the car. You want to make sure you don't hit any debris on the roadway or anything that might pop out in front of you, okay? And they want to work with every aspect of your company, not just your IT team or your HR, not just the CFO, but every aspect works together in harmony.
I really do want to ask you one more question about CBD and that one little cannabinoid in the cannabis plant and how it has been exposed to not screw up, but you know what's going on in Washington, D.C. The FDA doesn't want to take responsibility for it. The DEA doesn't want to take responsibility for it, and they're pointing fingers at each other as far as regulating it. In the meantime, it's everywhere. And it's really an unregulated substance. Where do you see the future of how many millions of dollars that have been invested in CBD companies, especially when I'm learning that CBN may be the more effective cannabinoid in the plant?
Well, I want to say this goes back to Marijuana Business Magazine a few months ago when they said that an estimated 55% or so of all CBD companies will go out of business by 2021. Right. And the reason why is that they don't have GMP, good manufacturing practices, okay? They're not getting their CBD tested by a third party. Mm-hmm. They're getting their CBD import from other countries that's not being tested, or it's too low. Like you're getting some people who have CBD and it's less than 10%, which is technically inferior CBD. Mm-hmm. So I really think when it comes down to this issue is that do things the right way. CBD is becoming more mainstream. The larger CBD companies are doing it the right way, where they're having the good manufacturer practices. They're having the third-party lab testing. They're making sure that every aspect of their supply chain is audited and inspected, and they know what's going on. So that's kind of my philosophy on that aspect when it comes to CBD.
How do people get in touch with you and to perhaps take advantage of your services and advisory role?
Great question. The best way, you can go to our website, ucsadvisor.com, or always feel free. I had no problem giving up my direct email, which is david@ucsadvisor.com.
Pretty simple stuff. David Cunic from UCS Advisor, thank you so much for joining us. I learned quite a bit from you today. I enjoyed now our second conversation, and I hope there will be more in the future as well.
Definitely, Jimmy. Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
So for David Cunic from UCS Advisor, I'm the host of In the Weeds, Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. Today's show is a bit different. Why? Because this interview has been a year in the making. The story was so compelling and we had so much information, it's taken a long time to finally put it all together. In the over 2 years of hosting In the Weeds, I've interviewed hundreds of people who have told their compelling stories about the role cannabis has played in their lives. Many claim that cannabis has saved their life, or at least changed their lives. In today's In the Weeds, you'll hear me talking to a guy from Maine who not only had weed change his life, it's now his livelihood as a caregiver. His name is Peter Tranchemontagne from the great state of Maine. Everyone knows him as Uncle Pete. He's a caregiver by definition, and that means a person who provides direct care to another person. In the world of cannabis, the definition is a bit different, but the premise is the same. And Uncle Pete, he lives it every day.
I know I've had serious health issues. I know I'm sick. I know I'm lucky to be able to walk. But if you can't laugh at that, you will dwell on it and you will not get any further in life. So f that.
Okay, so there's a little adult language in this, and that's a pretty healthy attitude if you think about it for Peter Tranchemontagne from Sanford, Maine. And how he got there is quite a story.
I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for marijuana. One of the only, not the only ones, but one of the few that I know that's alive using heavy doses of THC and keeping my pancreas and liver.
Keeping parts of those organs was an adventure unto itself that started back in 1986 when Pete was just 19.
I was living in New York City. Imagine coming from Sanford, Maine, living in New York City. Time of your life. I got a really good job fixing jet bridges that go on airplanes. So we flew all over the place. And one day I drank a glass of water out of my Queens apartment because it's water. And there was an emergency flight, and this is hilarious. Everything's always hilarious to me. I had one of those old Scarface beepers that would like digital with the red on it. I thought I was cool. It was for work. I wasn't a drug dealer, but it was so badass. And it went off, and it was my first one, and it was an emergency for an airline. And so they had a ghost crew waiting for me at JFK because there was another passenger jet. Then the jet bridge, sorry, I'm high. The jet bridge was stuck. So it's like $100,000 back in 1987, you know, an hour. So I got there, they shot me to Cincinnati Airport. And I remember on the plane, the stewardess, she was really cool because it was just us. It was a ghost crew. Do you want a beer? And I'm, no way, because station managers, I'm 19. And she poured me a glass of water. And I remember it. And it turns out that they never dumped the tanks when they landed because it was an emergency flight. They just fueled up and got me to Cincinnati. I drank water from Egypt. So New York City water in Egypt caused a biological germ warfare. And I went from 200 pounds, you know, making 90 grand a year back then, living it up, have my company paying all my bills, to just throwing up every day. And like every time I'd eat, and dysentery, and it's crazy to even talk, but it really happened. I lost almost 100 pounds in 2 months. And I went home and my mom thought I was on drugs. And she tricked me to go to the doctor, and that saved my life. They induced me into a coma, and oh, it's crazy. I was in a coma at Maine Medical from January.
What year was this?
In 1986. And then they woke me up in February, basically to say goodbye and give my consent to have my organs operated on to try to save me. And I appreciate it. That hospital's awesome. So go Maine Medical.
I've been there a few times myself.
Oh, they saved my ass. I saw all of them. But a long story shorter.
Not happening with you, Pete. Just not happening. We're going to be here a while.
So I went under like an 8-hour surgery. They like did that, whatever that surgery's called for a live autopsy. They had to get every digestive organ. And they found out like I poisoned my system drinking water. It wasn't even a cool story like we got shit-faced, you know, we ate something bad. There was none of that. It was
no moonshine.
Water. It was water. And we always knew back then, don't drink Mexican water. They didn't say nothing about New York water or a plane, you know. So
you had a transplant? Did this?
No. So what happened was I lost, let me see if I can get this straight. I lost a quarter of my liver, and then I lost a third of my pancreas, and because it was so infected, because I ended up getting a staph infection, and everything. Yeah, and I had no idea what it was. And next thing I know, they induced me in a coma. They let the swelling go down in the fight, and it didn't work. So they had to open me up, and they literally had to seal me with grommets. You know how they and you know, so they could sew me up. I was so sick, and I woke up in April, and it took so long to come out of it, and everything was different. You know, you cared instead of F you. You know. You just
Second lease on life will do that, right?
If you know, you're right. There was a second lease on life. You know, I always had a chip on my shoulder for a divorced kid, pissed, and to go through something like that. You know, it's awesome. Sorry, I usually don't talk about this at all. So excuse me. But
You never have to apologize for your own story.
Uncle Pete's gets even more amazing when you consider the next life-changing moment that happened in 1998. Once again, another workplace accident.
Well, I got tossed off a forklift at a warehouse, and I shattered T2 through C2, and also T8 is gone, which is your diaphragm. So for the rest of my life, it's like a nightmare. If I move wrong, I can't breathe. You go through that. And the pain from all the spasms, it's stroke material. So I'm not supposed to use my arms. I'm really a medical marijuana patient. Even though I say we grow awesome cannabis, it's really my wife, my daughter-in-law, and my son, because I can't transplant, I can't feel my fingers. I don't do any paperwork here. I can't do it. I'm totally 100% disabled.
Like so many people who have suffered a severe injury, Western medicine doctors prescribed a pain clinic. And you know what that means? Opioids to kill the pain.
So I'm supposed to be paralyzed from here down. And again, I don't talk about this, so this is weird. This isn't a pity party.
I needed to hear this story because I'd heard it from other people, and I just needed to hear it from you.
Can you imagine waking up from neck surgery after 215, 16 pounds, stronger than anybody, right? Working out all the time, hitting home runs in softball, left-handed, laughing my ass off. Oh, honey, look at this, and jacking one, you know, laughing, to telling you can only lift a glass of milk or a half a gallon of milk for the rest of my life. I had a gym downstairs people worked out in. I didn't know what to do, and I was always blue collar. And so I had to find myself, and I couldn't do it through a pain clinic. And I tried, and the pain clinic for about 18 months almost ruined my life. Madly in love with my wife, wanted a divorce. I wanted a divorce. And she's like, shut up. And she knew it was the pills. And I was just an asshole on it. And one of my little leaguers, all grown up, came over and he said, hey, you should smoke this pot. And
How old were you when this happened?
I got my medical
98?
in 98. And so all that time from 98 on, I would smoke pot. And so I wouldn't throw up from the pain.
From take your pick of what the reason is.
So I can't take narcotics, but he said I could. So for 2 years I did, and it was bad, throwing up blood, liver and pancreas ready to shut down. So I got all pissed off, and I told them I was all done taking their meds. Well, all of a sudden my wife comes home from work, she's crying, telling me, you didn't throw all those out, right? And I was just ready to, and I had a whole cupboard full. I'm pissed. I'm like, I'm done. And she goes, yeah, I'm okay. I'll support you smoking pot. That'll help you. But they called me and said, you will die if you don't wean yourself off all this meds. That was never on the cards when I went to this pain clinic, okay? That was bullshit, little fine prints that you can't, I don't like this, but you got to wean it. It took almost 45 days for the amount of Oxycontin or whatever they're called, all the heavy opioids, and that, you know, I didn't. And so the funniest thing that set me off, where I was telling everybody to get f***ed and I'm not taking this anymore, I answered the telephone. And remember my joke, I'll know you're not a telemarketer, about my last name? I was so out of it on pills, a fucking telemarketer called. I'm human, okay? And when they called, they asked me, how do I pronounce my name? And I was telling them, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm done. And that's what snapped me out of taking the narcotics. I didn't want to, I was out of it, you know, and I got duped by a telemarketer, you know, come on. So
And that was the trigger, you stopped.
that was the trigger where I stopped, and my wife came home, and we got it a plan with the doctors to wean off after 45 days. And I used cannabis the whole time, so I was done in 30. And I've been on cannabis the whole time. You know,
Saved your life. I heard you say it.
yes, it did. I'm a real medical patient. I got Social Security the first time. I don't know too many people that do. Social Security disability. They told me to go to a pain clinic. So, you know, we're going to try to change the world, protect medical. I think rec should be in every state, you know, but the medical and the scientists, let's if it's keeping me alive, and I'm not a doctor, I flunked science class twice. This f***ing got kicked out. So, the world's gonna hold on my ass to do this? So I'm surrounding myself with scientists, doctors, lawyers, people that can really put their foot down now and make a difference. Because there's no medical reason why I'm alive.
Considering all that, Uncle Pete is now dedicated to changing other people's lives through cannabis care. His Uncle Pete's Relief Family Ranch and Farm grows it, manufactures it, and of course sells it. Best of all, he's surrounded by his family who take care of Uncle Pete's relief business when Uncle Pete is taking care of fellow patients.
Okay, if you don't want to, you don't have to, hon. But when you get here, I'll take care of you, okay? I definitely believe in CBD.
Yep.
I've seen it straight solo use with children and adults that have grand mal seizures, epileptic.
Yep.
It works.
Right.
People that have joint pains, injuries that need like an aspirin boost, it really works. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it.
Right.
I find with high pain tolerance patients, I had a lady call last night, and her husband came down because it was CBD, so he brought it for her, and it was actually a CBD elixir, and it's from Maine. It's a full spectrum, like the Rick Simpson oil, but it's CBD.
Yep.
And it's a 1 ounce, you know, and there's droppers, and so she just wants to feel better, and so for this example, I'm having to take a full dropper full 3 times a day, and to call me when the ball is done to see if she sees any improvement at all, anything at all. Mm-hmm. And if there is any improvement, if it's a home run, great, we stay with this, right? Mm-hmm. And if it's not a home run, but it's there, then we'll boost it up to a THC CBD elixir, and then now we're adding THC to it, just like what we said.
Right.
And we'll go from there. We'll see how she feels, what's happening to her. She'll get a doctor's note before she does the THC. She already said if this is the route, she'll do this. So we're just working with someone to make her feel better.
Giving his patients the opportunity to feel better with cannabis drives this caregiver, but that's not all. He's also a champion political advocate for cannabis. Uncle Pete wanted to make sure no one who was on an organ donor list was denied receiving that life-saving organ because they had used cannabis. That was actually a law in Maine until Uncle Pete and some of his friends got to work on changing all that.
So what was happening is people were getting kicked off the transplant list. We had to go behind the scenes and meet every state senator, every representative that would just listen to us. And by the time they're done, they're crying because they know if they don't support this bill, someone's dying. And so there was really no holding back. Because we did all these yes on one, you know, I'm voting yes, because we believed in it. We didn't want anybody to die, and we couldn't say it online like, you dummies, you have to vote for this. If you smoke pot, you have to vote for this. And we couldn't say any of that. So we're like, I'm voting yes, we're protecting medical, and we had to change it. We had to change the law. And so when that guy told me I was wrong and we weren't in the greatest of medical programs, it was nauseating. So we had to do 18 months behind the scenes to meet Deborah Sanderson, Senator Brakey, Representative Sanderson, Senator Brakey. They did so much. So many people, it's hard to list them all. Catherine and Glenn Lewis, they're real growers. They do a lot for Maine. Paul McCarrier does a lot. And we just joined forces so we could change this law. And they had no idea, no one knew that if you got sick, you could not get an organ. But it's not like they're going to advertise it, you know. And for Maine Medical side, you were right at first. You were technically right with the data you have. You did not want to waste an organ. A human life is way too precious. So when this all came out that we couldn't get organs, well, it's Maine. Everybody's like, well, screw this. I'm pulling my medical card. No. What happens if you're in the same car with your son or daughter and everybody gets killed but one, and you're all related and you can give those organs, but you're all pissed and you killed the organ donor thing? Because you could give them out, you just couldn't receive them. So I had to go in Augusta and beg people not to kill their organ donor cards. And yes, they're right, and we are too. And I had them call every legislator in the state, and it was really good at us, the Civic Center. Call every legislator, we had the phone numbers, and it was a big stage. And I said, tell them we're gonna vote every one of them fuckers out. And they shit. And they realized, like, little old ladies are calling, little old men, people retired, people working, doctors, lawyers, professionals, media, people from out of state, scientists that were real, that I knew this was right, that medical's staying. If medical marijuana is in the mainstream, the human lifespan will increase by 10 years, easy.
Well, only time and more research will tell if that's true. Uncle Pete's life has been saved and changed for decades, but now he's living his best life in Maine, surrounded by his family during this historic time.
So since 1999, the state of Maine voted for cannabis for medical marijuana, or they call it marijuana, or whatever they want to call it. I'm just happy we can be a part of this industry. So I wasn't in the industry back then. I had a neck injury, and so throughout the years of understanding the damage I have, cannabis is helping, and I was looking into it. In 2010, I looked into getting my medical card because the voters, a referendum in 2009 allowed caregivers, mom and pop growers that could tailor medicine just to you. Dispensaries are out there, but there were waiting lines. There was like rations, and nah, this is Maine, you know, we can figure it out. I went to a caregiver, and it was awesome. I like to say his name, it's Fred Kessler, and you helped save my life, buddy. Really good man. He came to deliver one day because one of my problems is my arms go numb and I can't use them for a spinal cord injury. So I was going nowhere, just sitting at a table with the arms kind of coming back to life for a couple days, and he kept asking me, do you own this house? Because he delivered some cannabis to me. It was upsetting, you know. Of course, stoners can have houses, and he started laughing, and that was my first conversation to become a Maine caregiver. He felt I'd be very good for the program and for the industry. Nice man. And so I looked into it. I had him come over to tell my wife. My wife is, you know, a 5-foot little beauty, but she's a big woman in stature. And she's like, we're not drug dealers. And she gave him the rundown one side or the other. And when she realized that this was a brand new industry, that we could do this legally, then that was the game changer, because she saw how sick I was. And that's what started Uncle Pete's, you know, just from a caregiver delivering to me when I was sick. And
now you're giving back.
Yes.
To others.
So we found
the legal,
yes,
the legal framework that is existing in the state of Maine.
well, the legal framework was fragile.
Right.
And like there was no tax code for caregivers. That's a kiss of death. No matter how long you think you're going, there's just no future. And there wasn't any more dispensary licenses in Maine. There were four dispensary licenses with, I believe, 8 stores or whatever it was. It's just not enough for the state of Maine. So we realized there was no tax code for caregivers. That was done. So we worked very hard with our attorney, Revad Yule and Lamb Associates in Maine, to work with Maine State Revenue to see what should be done, not what could be done, but what has to be done. And it worked. We have tax codes now for caregivers, and that was really important to my wife coming on as Uncle Pete's relief and her patients, and same with my son and my daughter-in-law for the Tranch Ranch. You can't just do this half-ass whether you're sick or not. You have to do it right.
Right. You're
So-
going to run a business, you're going to run a business.
There was no business structure for this.
Right.
And then we were seeing the dispensaries, and I'm sticking up for you guys. You guys are getting screwed. You were hammered on every aspect and regulations, which you should have. And they were really lackadaisical here. And the majority of the caregivers are awesome. And most of them weeded out that were terrible, but there was no regulations for the terrible ones. So we'd all kind of police it ourselves and call them out, but that's not really how you run an industry. This is like the greatest community in the country, this green community in Maine. It's awesome.
The way life should be, or the way buds should be?
The way Bud should be, definitely.
So if I walk in, I make an appointment with you.
Yes, you have to. In our city ordinance, you have to always have a scheduled appointment, and rightfully so, because we're not public. We're, you know, you have to have appointment only.
Right.
And that's where you can get the better care instead of 4 or 5 people coming in here, and maybe you just had, like we talked about earlier, that unimaginable doctor's visit where you're just horrified. You don't need a public building with tie-dyes and the music and people just coming in to feel better, to medicate and then go out and raise hell. You're going to a place to possibly extend your life or to at least make yourself comfortable for the end of it. And so that's the difference between medical and rec. We don't try to, as you buy your medicine that you need, that we find out, because there's so many different ways, from Rick Simpson oil capsules to tinctures, and we'll go over all the differences, but there's literally hundreds of ways to dispense, you know, there really is.
So I walk in, I've got chronic pain, I've got my card. Oh, by the way, I do have my Massachusetts card, which, by the way, is perfectly legal to use in the state of Maine now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And
Right.
so before this, you would have to get permission from your state and my state for $50 for 90 days.
Right.
So for us to do a sale, I take your driver's license valid, I take your Massachusetts state card, and then we do a designation form after for your privacy. And then you can come in. So for 15 days, you're allowed 2.5 ounces. And I believe when bio-tracking comes in, they'll keep track of you through the whole state, which is fine.
Regulations, tracking, keeping meticulous records for patients are all part of what this caregiver in Maine is all about. So how many square feet do you have?
The whole house is 42.
Yeah, but with the growing.
Oh, under 1,000. We stay under 1,000, yeah, to be efficient.
Under 1,000 square feet, and you're able to...
All my grows are, combined are under 1,000 on purpose.
The message that we continue to come back to is this is medicine.
Yes.
Everybody has a different effect with the medicine.
Yes.
And every body is different because everybody's endocannabinoid system is different.
Yes.
Everybody's tolerance to THC is going to be different if they decide to take THC at all. Do we have CBD only capsules too?
We can offer those CBD only capsules.
So what's happening is you're actually a compounder. You know the old days of compounding medicine, where they used to make their own little aspirins and whatever the heck, right? So you do the same thing.
I'm telling the lady that makes these what I'm going on. If you come in here and we design them just for you, we will tailor them made for you. And if they're too strong or they're not strong enough, we'll increase or decrease.
Right.
And just kind of find out where you can function back in society and not be a drone.
Right.
And not be in pain because of what disabled you in the first place, you know?
So there's an individualized medicine.
Yes, it is. And it's you have to be very responsible to do this. You don't have a right to burn a joint wherever you want just because it's legal.
Right. Or it's actually illegal to burn a joint in public in Massachusetts.
Yep.
Even though for 80 years, even during Prohibition, plenty of people burned joints in public in Massachusetts. Not that I was around all 80 years. But you get what I'm saying.
Might have helped to that.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you just, you have to be responsible and do the right thing. The Freedom Rally was a perfect example.
Right.
We all smoked, I know speaking for myself, I smoked 1 or 2 joints there back to back and had a great time seeing all my friends.
Right.
It's the way for commodity, knowing that we were right. We weren't wrong, we did this wrong. We did everything right. And we all still have the businesses. And we can just see each other and just just kind of reflect, you know, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So
it's a new normal.
So in Massachusetts, what are there going to be, social clubs?
They are trying, they have a pilot program, I believe, in Uxbridge for social clubs. I will tell you, I have had some experience with social clubs now that I have visited the island of Jamaica.
Nice.
And it was quite an experience, let's just say.
I was just a big social club when I went. That was awesome.
Yeah, it depends on where you are and all this. But, I mean, look, we're in a whole new era right now. As I say all the time, it's a whole new world of weed, okay? And we're figuring out the ways to incorporate it into our world, into our 21st century society.
Well put.
Without making it into as big a deal as a lot of people think it should be, which it isn't.
It isn't. That's what regulations are for. The green gold logo is pretty awesome. Again, all that's eyeballed. We have to always put underneath it green gold, so Gucci's cool with this and they're not mad at us. We didn't want to ever come across.
Did you talk to Gucci?
We've had attorneys.
Attorneys talk.
Yeah, so what they did was to make sure we don't sell anything with just GG, and we had no idea. I didn't own any Gucci stuff, and my wife, my son, we're from Maine, you know, and maybe there is Gucci in Maine, but I've been sick for a long time. There was no Gucci in my budget.
Sure in Cape Elizabeth.
Okay, so not me. So we had no idea. So the agreement is we always put green gold under our licensed GG, and then they're cool with it. But there's no reason if we go to Jamaica, I just don't get it, and we are going to change this. If you go to Jamaica and you want an Uncle Pete's Relief strain that you've gotten here, because we've had interviews.
Right.
Why isn't there a shop there where you can get international cannabis?
Right.
That's not hurting anybody, not trying to overtake the market. I'm small.
Right.
But certainly this should be looked at. And same here, we should be able to have an international shelf of marijuana cigarettes, different flavors for you to enjoy.
We're looking at like a microbrewery. We're looking
absolutely.
at wines, different wines like Napa Valley.
In a tasting area, in a place.
Exactly right. By the way, at the dispensary, there was a tasting room. I'll admit it.
That must have been awesome.
It was awesome.
That was cool.
It was
Absolutely.
awesome because it was at night. I was done. I'd worked 12 hours that day. It was a perfect thing to end the
I
day.
hope you found a comfy chair and just melted. That's what I would have done.
It was a lot. It was quite an experience. All right, so I get the different doses. I get the capsules.
Okay.
Walk me through. You behind you is your menu.
Yes.
Walk us through your menu a little bit and talk to us about the different strains that you have. Everything you grow is here.
Yeah.
You have a 3-to-1 I see CBD.
Yes, we do.
And you actually have some pre-rolls that are 3-to-1 CBD?
No, those are straight THC.
I see, yeah, I see it.
Because those really are, people just don't come in to want a pre-roll of CBD in my shop. My patients are all more heavy towards THC.
Yep.
I am too.
Right.
And so if there was a big market for it, of course I'd have it for my patients available to make them feel better.
Well, walk us through the different
Okay, so you see how unless you're colorblind, and one of my buddies that works here is colorblind, so every now and then you'll see like a blue in here and he just misses it, so we all shit on him. But unless you're colorblind, what we have here is green and red and purple. So the green is for hybrids, which are combinations of sativa or indica. Yep. And then we have sativas, and then and then we have purple for indicas. So it's kind of just a quick board to look at to understand what you're looking for. And then we'll narrow it down, like say your stomach hurts and you're vomiting a lot. Well, you're going to need an indica or a hybrid. And then we'll kind of see which ones work for you and make sure we have it on hand for you.
Yeah. So a lot of people are now kind of poo-pooing the sativa and indica thing because of the individual effect on everybody, so that a sativa won't have the same effect on one person as it might another. Do you buy into that? I
do to some extent, but there are mostly similar traits chemically. There's like I forget the name, but they make the difference between sativa and indica. I have the chart over there. I just don't want to say the name wrong. Okay. But there chemically is a difference. Okay. So when you get into like distillate cartridges, chemically it's changed. So that effect isn't going to do it to you. It's more of the THC in there. Yeah. But right here in the flowering, and that's what the lure for the state of Maine, and I will throw this out to all the growers of Maine, we truly have some of the best flower in the world. It's the water. You know, everybody can go indoors, outdoors. Maine rocks. We have mountains, we have rivers, we have springs. Mine's on a spring. My well is on a 3-foot spring, and we've never ran out. We don't have to do anything but open from the tap. So the lure of Maine and the different tastes is everything. It is everything. We feel we have some of the finest buds in the world, and we've been told that as well. So what we do is make sure that the Agent Orange smells like Agent Orange. And this hybrid right alone right here helps veterans just to sleep, shut their brain off at night. That's simple. They may have trigger words the next day that will bring them back where they are, but at least there'll be a fresh brain from the night before, which is awesome. Because before there was no getting away from the dreams.
Right. How do you come up with the names? I know a lot of them are based on where the seed comes from, but how do you come up with these names? Where do the names, how do they originate?
So pretty much, they're all just different people that have combined different strands together and come up with some really outlandish names. We don't sell like cat piss. I'm not having an end-of-life patient paddle care come down here and I'm gonna have cat piss written up here. Some of the doctors we worked with in Oregon and scientists, they're coming up with a DNA coding system. So if you travel and say let's go with Agent Orange because it's on the top of the list, that's your go-to when you come here. You can do your thing now and you can be productive. Oh my God, you gotta go to Florida for 10 days. How sick are you gonna be? You can't bring that. So where's the dispensary? See if they'll take your Maine or Massachusetts card, right? Because that's what we're working on.
Right. Yep.
So if that's in play and you go into the dispensary and they have Agent Orange, is it really Agent Orange?
Right.
They don't know. They're growing from seeds that say Agent Orange. Where's the DNA code testing? So there's just a letter on here and a number system. We're fine with whatever you want to call your cannabis, but we really want to make it so now we are allowed travel interstate all over the world. People can go through their strains, so it can be brought down into distillate, so it can be brought down into rosin, resin, crumbles, and different types of scientifically made into capsules, so we can have your tailored made for you, which is what this should be. Right. And that's my whole thinking for all this. I have to use this every day. I was smoking 12 joints a day. My throat hurt bad, and my medicine, my cured meds, and we kick ass. I had to look into doing concentrates and capsules. And I have to be careful because I have a bad pancreas and liver. I can't digest oils. So it's a fine line with how can I medicate with transdermal patches, which is awesome now. And then I use medibles and I use concentrates. Barely really smoke joints unless we're out and socially having a great time.
Uncle Pete is obviously having a great time after 3 near-death experiences, helping to change an unfair organ donor law, and caring for patients. All have defined his life so far.
But his biggest highlight is living his life, running a business surrounded by his family.
Well, yeah, my wife Tina, I love you. You do all the work, okay? I told you I'd say it.
She who must be obeyed.
Well, you know what? Quite remarkable for her to quit her job to keep me out of the hospital, you know? And she left a good insurance company to take care of me. And she realized I couldn't do the transplant and I couldn't do the seedlings. My arms are damaged and I couldn't grow. And when she realized that, my son and my daughter-in-law came on, and they all came on to be awesome. And we really have good, clean products because they're farmers, you know, and they have a passion to keep me alive. Good family. My whole family does this with Uncle Pete's Relief and the Tranch Ranch. And we believe in this. This is right, you know. It's not about just smoking a joint all the time, you know. It's fun, like later, it's fun. But try having to do 12 of those a day. It's not fun. The smile goes away.
When your whole family quits their job to keep you alive, you don't just take this like, what the hell, you know? I made a promise to them I'd change this, and I have been. But all credit to them, they type everything. You know, when I go to the State House, I'll tell them what I want to say, and then I walk away, because if I'm over them, no, it's not what I want to say, they'll just shut up and let me do this. My wife and my son, they're awesome. And there's our attack donkey, Chucky.
Attack donkey?
Yeah, I love that. He's a little guy. He's like an Angus bull.
So how big is all your property?
We own 5 acres, and my son owns 4 acres. He came back from Kansas and built this house over there, pulling oil. So one son is home, and we see our grandkids.
Oh, it's great.
It's a home run. So we really are a team here. Whether caregivers are under the same business or not, we have our own tax IDs. We're all one fighting to stay alive. So like you'll see tomorrow, I'll see other caregivers, and they're like, hey, because we're all fighting together. And again, like I tell everybody in the cannabis industry that actually sells retail, grows, sells wholesale, has patients. A guy that I learned a lot of, he told me, he had a question for me because he figured I'd come up with a smart ass answer. He says, how much cannabis was sold in Maine last year? And he goes, or in the country legally. And I'm like, oh shit. So I'm like, you know, kind of giving it a shot here. And he goes, can I stop you? I'm like, yeah. He goes, every bit of it. Every bit of it was sold. Everybody sold it. We're in an industry where there's a demand for people to feel better, whether you're sick or not. We're in an industry where alcohol is not getting it done, and people are turning towards marijuana for cigarettes, for inebriation, that are healthy. That's okay. We're changing each one. We're right. We changed everything, and this is the days we're living in, I guess.
And you have more than one grow house?
Right here? No, just here.
Just here.
Just here for now.
Yeah.
You know, eventually I'll expand.
Yep.
But for now, I can take care of our patients.
Okay. Cool.
There was nothing like coming home, you know, and I'm glad I live here. I really do. I love this state.
The way buds
should be.
That Uncle Pete, he's a great guy. Pete Tranchemontagne. Uncle Pete's Relief is his caregiver company. Sanford, Maine is his home. Green Gold is the clothing line and logo. The way buds should be in the great state of Maine, the way life should be. And Uncle Pete, he's working on life number 3. That's it for In the Weeds this week. I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another special edition of Weed Talk Now. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young.
And I'm the founder of Cannabis.net, Curt Dalton.
And we are so lucky to have alongside with us, all the way from South Dakota, Melissa Mentele. Did I do the last name right this time when I was under pressure?
Nope, it's Mentele. It's okay, though. It's better than mental. People get at that one too. So I appreciate not going in that direction.
And you said you have a lot of relatives, like 300, and everybody has a different pronunciation of the last name, right?
We do. I married into a family that doesn't know how to pronounce their last name, so they all wing it.
There you go.
Always err on the side of caution with a mentally, just go safe.
Just go safe. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But didn't I write it down as mentally? I did. There it is. It's just, looking at your notes and doing a million things at once just never happens. Okay, let's just keep it going because I don't want to redo the open. Let's just jump right into it. Melissa, what is the current situation with marijuana laws in South Dakota?
Ooh, that's a good question. South Dakota currently has the harshest marijuana laws in the United States. We do have a felony by possession charge, which is felony ingestion. So say I got off a plane today from Colorado and for some reason had a law enforcement interaction and had to give them a urine sample. That would be a felony for consuming cannabis in this state. Our laws are set up to fail immediately because we don't have small possession laws. We have basically, you can have 7 pounds and under, and it's the same charge. Ooh. So yeah, it's tough. So South Dakota is in a dire need of some reform. We do need patient access, and we do need straight across the board open access to and for adult use. And so, yeah, we're number one for bad laws in our state on this one.
And what you explained to us earlier was the fact that you're in charge of the medical side of the question. There's 2 questions on the ballot. One is a medical cannabis policy amendment to the Constitution, the state Constitution, and the other is a adult use recreational. At this time, with 5-6 months to go, 4 months, I don't know, I lost track of the time during this whole COVID thing. How confident are you? What are your poll numbers looking at? And do you have any more money to spend on the campaign?
Well, good questions. So we have 2 issues on the ballot. We have the Constitutional Amendment A, which is adult use, which also has a section in it to ensure that hemp is allowed to be grown in the state of South Dakota. Our governor for the last 2 years has basically kind of set our farmers aside on the hemp issue. So we passed it this year, but still do not have any crops in our fields. And then Amendment A also does have protections for the medical statutory issue, which will absorb the statutory once they both pass. We are the first state ever to have both issues on the ballot at the same time, which I think is really exciting. And I think it's great because our state has been known to decimate voter initiatives. 2 years ago, they took apart I Am 22, which was our anti-corruption bill. And so that was a concern when we did ironic, huh? Anti-corruption. Let's just dismantle that. But so for the statutory, having Amendment A pass alongside it does give us those constitutional protections, and it does protect our patient program from being absorbed further down the line, such as happened in other states. And so it does keep them in 2 separate paths, and it does create 2 really strong programs for the state.
Hey, Melissa, how does this play in with Native Americans and tribal associations? What's South Dakota's stance, and what are tribes trying to do as far as cannabis within the state and getting permits? Are you working with them, or is this kind of a separate avenue to get legalization, or what are they up to?
Okay, so tribes are managed under federal law. So this year we have tribal partners that have put hemp in because their programs were approved by the USDA. And so we do have tribal hemp. We have 3 tribes in the state that have passed resolutions throughout their reservation to legalize cannabis, whether for medicinal use or for adult use. We do partner pretty heavily with the tribes in the state. We have great allies in them, and we support what they do and they support what we do. I always say that we take them off the island because currently with tribal laws, they are only within the reservations. Once our state law passes, they're able to transport and move their product, into our state shelves and also reservation to reservation. So we've had great relationships with the tribe ever since Flandreau had their grow facility here back in, it would have been 2016.
So are there tribes within the reservation growing and selling in a retail level?
Not yet. They're just starting to get up and running with that. I think everybody's pretty cautious after what happened with Flandreau. And so they're taking it slow but steady and making sure that they know all of their rights. With the Cole Memorandum and the Wilkinson Memo being taken away by Jeff Sessions, that did change things a lot for tribes and how they felt about their sovereignty and how they were going to take that path forward.
Part of my question had to do with how much money was spent, and I was looking at some notes, and it looks like you guys spent $1 million just to get the signatures and to get it onto the ballot. Like everything in America, sometimes it does come down to fundraising. Obviously, you're still continuing to raise funds, and I did happen to notice that you have skin in the game, Melissa. Way to go on that one. I think that was awesome.
Yeah, just a little skin in the game.
Well, it's $2,000. I'm going to say it. It's public record, okay? So you gave $2,000 of your own money because you believe so much in this cause, right?
I did. I actually have given $60,000 over the past 5 years. So my husband and I, we funded the issues prior to gaining partnerships with national partners. We wanted to try and do it grassroots, but we learned a very valuable lesson. $60,000 in the state of South Dakota on a ballot initiative is a penny in an ocean compared to what you need to actually make the ballot.
So you said 5 years and 60,000. What was your passion? I mean, that's a long time we're talking, even looking back on when Colorado went. Was it personal? Was it medicinal? Or kind of what got you in the game? That's serious 5 years ago. What motivated both of you?
I worked in nursing up until 2012 when I had a patient accident. I was lifting a patient out of a chair and we went to go turn. She had Alzheimer's and got very nervous and threw herself back into the chair, and in the process caught my thumb on her belt loop. And when she did that, she hyperextended my left arm and destroyed my shoulder. So she pulled my bicep out of the attachment, tore my labrum in my shoulder in 3 spots, tore my hip, and herniated 5 discs in my back. Effectively, she ended my nursing career is what happened. And I am a chronic pain patient now because of that. But opioids and my body do not mix. They make me vomit. I have allergic reactions to them. So we started looking for an alternative and found a salve that actually worked to take the pain away and gave me some functionality in my hand. For about 2 years, I had a contracture where my hand bent forward almost in half and it faced up my arm and I couldn't use it and I wasn't able to use my arm. And so cannabis changed that for me and it made it very personal. We also have a daughter who has seizures. She grew out of them when she was little, but started working with patient communities and asking around and doing some research and found with epilepsy with children, it was really effective. And so it became personal on 2 levels for me. My daughter had her first set of seizures in 15 years a year ago. And so we really have some serious skin in the game. I like to say we have a whole body in the game. It's something that I really believe in. And my husband was really nervous when I started this. We live in a community of 400 people. I'm not from a small town, so I don't adhere to small town politics or understand that you're supposed to act differently in a small town and apparently can't have political positions. But I just said, this is really important to me and I'm going to do it. And so I drug all 3 of my kids to a rally and he was mad at me for about a year, but here we are 6 years later.
That was my next question. When did he switch over and say, I'm going with you on this? So 3 years later?
No, he's still not switched over. It's been a hard road in our house. He's very conservative. this is terrible to say, but I married a Trump voting Republican, and I am a diehard Democrat from a Republican family that believes in, I'm very motivated to help in social issues, and social justice is big for me. And working in nursing and seeing so many demographics over the years that I've worked in mental health and Alzheimer's care, it was important. But he just knows better. He just knows that you can either be with me or be in my way, but if you're in my way, I'm probably just going to run you down and do what I want anyway. So he just provides support services, which means we get dinner maybe once a week from him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping he has equal time when it comes to taking care of your children too. I really do kind of hope that's true. Is that true?
They're 21, 20, and 16. They don't even like us anymore, let alone let us take care of them. I mean,
did it ever come to a point in your house though where you wanted to use cannabis for the seizures and he's watching his daughter saying, I don't want to do this? Or was it, I see the results, let's do it?
She was old enough to make a decision without us and told us after the fact is how that worked. And
probably the best way to do it in that house.
Yep, it was. And for me, how do I say this without sounding like DSS needs to come knock on my door? I was appalled and absolutely elated because yes, I was like, you did such a good thing for yourself. And she's been seizure free now again. I mean, we went 15 years without anything, had 3 within a 2-day period. She did what she had to do, and she doesn't live with me anymore. She's engaged to be married and bought her own home. So it's not as though the use of cannabis did anything to detrimentally affect her life. She is an amazing kid.
And I'll tell you, there's nothing more amazing as a parent to have eventually get them to be adult people, adult children, and actually talk to them almost eye to eye, almost face to face. You can only get them to the 18, and then they're pretty much on their own. They have to make those decisions. So it sounds like you did pretty good there, Mom.
I think I did. I always say that. I'm like, wow, I didn't screw anybody up. We haven't paid for therapy. I mean, we're doing good. Everybody's got a job. Everybody graduated high school. I've got one graduating college in December. One, they're amazing kids. And, I've always been really upfront with them. And when I started cannabis advocacy, I had more big conversations with my children than I did with my husband about it. So
it can put a lot of strain on a relationship when there is a pro-cannabis and an anti-cannabis male and female, or male and male, or female and female these days. But point being, that can put a lot of strain on a relationship. Yes?
Yes, and it did, and it still does. But he's learned over the years that I'm really pig-headed, and if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And when we didn't make the ballot 2 years ago, he's like, well, are you done yet? I'm like, no, we're doing this. Like, I made a promise to a little boy in his family that we would not stop till his dad didn't have to commit a felony. And I'm going to keep that promise.
Do you want to walk us through that story, please?
Yeah. We have a family, the Hendrickson family, who has a son with Dravet syndrome. And we've worked with Elijah now. He started with us when he was 2.5 or 3, right under 3, in a wheelchair, made no eye contact. His dad would say he was just kind of this lump of a child. Started working with him, and back in 2016, sent him to Colorado, started helping their family do what needed to be done. And last year, I walked Eli into a meeting with me, made a promise to his dad that year that I would make sure that he didn't have to commit a felony. He's a former police officer, and his wife is a nurse for the VA hospital. And he knew every day what they were doing. And I said, I can't watch this as being a mom who has had a child that has had seizures. My daughter had a cardiac and respiratory arrest with 2 of them. We almost lost her. I've been there. I know how hard it is for parents with children with seizures. And I told them, I said, George, I will not stop until this is legal. I will make sure that you do not have to worry about going to jail and your son, because the concern is when you have a special needs child that if they end up in foster care and a foster parent isn't able to care for them and adjust the monitors and the medications and doesn't know your child, that your child could end up dead. And that was their greatest fear, is that he would be taken away. And so I keep promises. I'm really big on that.
Well, you certainly kept your promise to come on this show, and I appreciate that. Curt, I know you have another question because you're so good
you
at
have
that.
both amendments or ballots are both on. How can people, whether they're in South Dakota or outside, after hearing your story, support you? What is the best thing for them to do online, donation-wise? What can I do right now?
You can go to South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws. I'm actually going to look it up because I'm terrible about remembering it, and don't tell my boss that.
Well, I looked it up, and that's correct.
Good. I don't remember if it's a .org or a .com. That's my bad.
Well, if it's a nonprofit, it's probably a .org.
.org. So South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws.org or newapproachsouthdakota.org. We have two websites. You can make a donation through either one of them. We will have a merchandise store up next week. So if you want a really nice shirt to support both issues, we do have those. We have yard flags. We have hemp hats that are really awesome. So, you get to rock a piece of history is what I tell people. Is South Dakota is the reddest state in the nation. In fact, my Instagram handle is Red State Advocate because of that. Our soil bleeds red. So this is a chance for people to really look at our state for once and buy something that we're going to make some history. We're not going to be last in the nation. We're going to be first in the nation to pass both, hopefully. Crossing my fingers, knocking on wood.
What are your numbers say now about the support you're getting?
Numbers are really good.
I mean, you must be having a poll. Somebody's taking a poll out in South Dakota, right?
There's been lots of polls done in South Dakota, but for some reason, I did not get. We have our big meetings on Tuesdays, and last Tuesday we only kind of talked about this, and I didn't get full numbers. But polling is phenomenal for medical. Medical is a slam dunk. However, adult use, we're gonna struggle a little bit, but we're just gonna keep doing the best that we can and being honest and transparent and having hard conversations. In South Dakota, we've done some things differently. Like we went to the South Dakota Chamber and to like the Sioux Falls Chamber and all of the chambers of commerces and approached them with this as a business and a compassionate business. And for the first time, I think ever, the chamber for the state didn't come out in opposition to a medical cannabis bill. They came out as neutral, which was pretty amazing. And that included all three health systems for our state.
If on midnight voting night you go 1-1, you win the medical and lose the rec, how do you feel?
Torn and scared. We'll be honest with you. After what they did to I Am 22, we're scared. We're scared that if we don't pass both of them, they will take out home cultivation or remove our caregiver program or change the bill into something it wasn't intended to be. And that's scary for us. Fortunately, we have had the same language legislatively sponsored in its entirety twice. So it has went through legislative session 2 times. But having both of them not pass does create a little bit of nervousness and a little bit of fear. And our patient families are very concerned that, most of them would never support adult use. It's not on our radar, but having the ability to know that we have some constitutional protections is really, really important.
How frustrating is it as an American citizen when you know for sure that this is the right thing to do for our humanity, and you still have to educate and sell that to your legislator? People that are supposed to be listening to what the populace wants and still resist change.
It's frustrating. We do gigantic call-in and letter writing campaigns during legislative session. We actually start a few weeks prior to them going in and run it all the way through, and then we do a lobby day. But it's very frustrating to have people look us in the face and say, nope, that's political suicide. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't care if it's political suicide for you. What you're supposed to do is grant and represent us, the wishes that we have. So if your political career stops at being a South Dakota senator or a South Dakota House member, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not here to take you to Congress. I'm not here to make you governor. I'm here for you to listen to what I'm saying to you because you took a job to represent us. And I feel that if they don't need to go anywhere else politically. I mean, you failed the first test you had, and that was to represent your constituency.
We have a similar situation in Massachusetts, maybe with our government and our governor and recreational. A lot of feet dragging and not listening to what people told him. And he wanted to do his, wasn't a fan, and dragged a lot of feet and slowed everything down for years, really. So we can relate a little bit.
And go ahead, Melissa.
Well, with the medical, after the first year of being in peer, so when I started doing legislative policy work, I went to peer. I'd never been there before. I didn't know the House, the Senate. I didn't know who anybody was. I basically went up there and was like, let's just put this to bed. Let's legalize medical marijuana. Let's all go back home, and we're just going to have this happy, hunky-dory, very Pollyanna approach to it. And I got kicked in the teeth and learned some very hard lessons that first year. But what we did do is, if you look at our medical bill, it ended up being 25 pages, 95 sections. I call it drawing pictures and using crayons. So hopefully there's no feet dragging, because we didn't leave anything open for them to drag on. We gave them a literal roadmap from the day it passes, and step by step, every single thing they need to do, all the way to Jack's Law at the very end of it, to implement a program for our school children. We did all of the work for them. I don't know if either of you have had the chance to read the medical bill, but it is one of the most comprehensive that the United States has ever seen. It's a big bill, and we wanted to make sure that we covered everything. And I went to the governor, and I went to the Department of Public Safety, and we went to the Department of Health, and we said, we are going to do this. We are going to take it to the ballot. You tell me now what you want before we take it to the voters, because once we're there, you don't get to make changes. So give me your wishes now. And we had good conversations, and we adjusted to things that they thought were important, and we changed those.
One of the themes of the last few months as America's gone through this whole COVID-19 thing is the fact that cannabis might be in a position to benefit, to kind of restore the economy, expand the economy with jobs. Are you sensing any kind of help from the COVID-19 pandemic in your grassroots campaign?
Whew, that's a big question, because right now it's just killing us. They canceled every event that we would normally do, every fair, parade, everything. I don't want to say COVID has been a benefit. I think it has made many of us see, and basically everybody in America see, that we live in a country that is so, a pandemic puts us on economic collapse. We need to have a more sustainable economy that we're doing, whether it be statewide or federal wide, that has jobs, that is sustainable through a pandemic. And, you know, one of my biggest things is we've had lots of great conversations about funny money, and how during a pandemic, we've seen so many people that live off credit lose things, lose everything, because they don't have actual resources. They're just kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I think cannabis gives people more of a stable ground, because you can create a business out of it. And it doesn't have to be a big corporation. It could be a small mom and pop business. You can do small scale cultivation for some dispensaries. You can have a small dispensary, but it is something that can support your family. And I think now with COVID, a lot of people are understanding that sustainable jobs and the ability to support your family without slashing a credit card is super important.
I don't know if I told you or Isabel told you how this whole thing came about, but one of our partners in distribution is the podcast out of Washington, D.C. called Vote Pro Podcast. And, you know, when you do a podcast, you get to see where your downloads come from. And they've been in like 36 countries, and 49 states in the United States have downloaded their podcast, except for one. That would be South Dakota. Yes. So we're hoping...
Melissa might be the first tonight.
That's right. Well, you know, it's a Vote Pro podcast. You know, they're great guys, and, you know, they contribute to our weekly news video as well. I hope...
No, we're number one.
You know what? I give Melissa a lot of credit. She's trying to change and be part of history. That's one of the reasons why I built this little venture of mine too, is I recognize that we are part of a historic time. And this was way before the pandemic. And now, we're right in the middle of that, or at least we're trying to come out of that. And now we're moving forward and trying to figure out what that, and I hate to use the term, that new normal is going to look like. Curt and I talk about this a lot on our show whenever we do get together, and none of us really know what's going to happen in November. Okay, we really don't. I mean, I was shocked when it happened 4 years ago. And I guess we all kind of learned our lesson, at least up here in the Northeast. And I know you probably guess which way I lean. I don't know what's going to happen after November. But the fact that you guys are out there pounding the pavement and pushing the envelope and trying to get this movement going, I give you so much props, so many props. I wish I could write you that check to equal at least what you guys put in, but I'll give you a forum. I will give you the forum and let you again tell us how people can get involved to help this cause. Because if South Dakota can turn it around, what's left? Nothing, right? I mean, we can take on the world.
I tell people that all the time. If we can pass this in South Dakota, we can get federal legalization through and federal banking so we can put our money somewhere. Thank you. Thank you about the history comment. South Dakota is a hard state, and it's been a journey here. And I think you're right on the money. We don't know what's going to happen in November. My husband and I, I'll say my husband and I, just for credit for him, but I bought a farm a month ago, a little 2-acre farm, because what if the whole world burns down in November? I mean, it could happen.
It's not 1%, it's not 1%. You're right.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know.
No, and we are, we talk about new normal, and we're supposed to be on this downward trend of flattening the curve, and then we have the highest numbers and months come out a couple days ago, and then we've got Texas back on stay-at-home orders and California going back on them. We just don't know. And I think that, for South Dakota, our biggest thing, if we have South Dakota listeners, I'm going to say this: fill out your absentee ballot request. That is so important. Make sure you're registered to vote. Fill out the absentee ballot request and vote absentee, because in November we may have murder hornets. We don't know. We could have earthquakes that split the United States in half.
The locusts are coming.
Exactly. Then you don't even have to go outside. I will send you the stamp.
We're all smiling about the 10 plagues right now. I just want to say that's really not something I want to deal with right now, on top of everything else. One more South Dakota quick story. And I was a history major many moons ago, and Curt always has this thing whenever we have cannabis guests on to you know where I'm going with this, Curt?
Yeah, doesn't end well for me.
No, it does not. Who if you had a Mount Rushmore of weed, who would you put on the Mount Rushmore of weed? And I'll be admitting this, that I did not know that Mount Rushmore was actually in South Dakota. So learned that. Now that I've given you a little time to think about that, do you have any? Would you like to nominate someone for the Mount Rushmore of weed? At least one person, perhaps. You have a shot at it, by the way, in your state. I want to tell you right now.
I have to say this: I would nominate nobody, because I think that there's so many people that have gotten into this that did it for reasons that were really close to our hearts, and that goes for all of the friends I've made nationally. Nobody that I work with got into this because they wanted to be recognized or they wanted to be famous for cannabis. People got into this because they wanted to change people's lives. And any person that I know personally that I would say deserves that honor would be offended that I said that, because that's not what they're here for. So I would leave the mountain in its beautiful natural state, and we take our souls to bed every night, and most of us know what we do and what good we do. So I think that's good enough for a lot of us.
Well, we salute your efforts. We support them. It's been a pleasure having you on this show to talk and enlighten us Northeastern
liberal Democrat snobs, if you will. I'll admit it. Okay, and I feel very guilty about it. That there might be hope in South Dakota after all, and I really hope that in this particular case, you win out and you go 2-0, not 1-1, 2-0.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Come in November. If we don't have the 10 plagues of the world, you're welcome to come hang out with us on election night and see. I mean, it's being part of history. You could podcast live from our offices.
I might buy Jimmy a ticket for that November night to South Dakota. You better watch it.
Come on.
I will tell you.
That's what you wish for, Melissa.
I will.
I'm not scared.
I will make.
No, I definitely know you're not. No, you are not scared.
I will
not
make
at all.
Note. I will make a note to check on that for sure. And again, we wish you the best of luck. And of course, you did mention something I'm just going to reiterate again. The most important thing when it comes to an election, especially in this one, is to vote. Perhaps the greatest thing that might happen in November is that we have the largest turnout of voters in my lifetime, because it boggles my mind when I find out that, only, 45% of the whole voting voted. That makes no sense. You talk about what people have sacrificed. People die for that, okay? We want to make sure that those people that are over the age of 18 get out there and cast their ballots one way or another, because that is what this country is all about. So, Melissa, thank you.
One last thing to share with that.
Go, girl. Go ahead.
So, South Dakota, for our absentee ballot applications, we are at 4 times right now what they were in 2016. So we are at over 100,000 people that have requested to vote absentee. We're making history with that right now. Our Secretary of States and our county auditors were blown away. So
good.
Yep. I think voter turnout is going to be big this year. So I'm excited.
Certainly. All right. Well, that'll do it for another edition of Weed Talk Now. I am the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young.
And I am the founder of Cannabis.net. And thank you, Melissa, for joining us on this episode.
Best of luck in South Dakota. That'll do it. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. And see you next time on Weed Talk Now. Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.